we are candid. We talk straight talk. We tell people what we think. And that tradition and those values live today.
Are the source of all governmental power. That the authority of the people is to be extended, we believe, not restricted, in equality for all and privileges for none.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to a Dem Good Time. Of course, Rachel, your communications director, and joining me, fearless leader.
I'm Iris Garcia. I'm the executive director here at Tarrant County Democratic Party, and I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Dennis Sherrard, who is running for Texas House District 94.
Say hello, Dennis.
Hello, Dennis. No. Hello, guys. Great to be with you yet again. Welcome, everybody.
Yes. Repeat guest. Yay. Our first one. Our first repeat. This is amazing.
I'll be here all week.
Awesome.
So before we kind of get into it with Dennis, let's just remind everybody. And Dennis, you could actually talk about this as well. No need to exclude you, I guess. But we did just come off of an amazing week last week. Let's see. We had what?
Oh, we had so many things.
We had our birthday bash, which Dennis got to be a part of. Did you bid on a cake? I don't remember.
I did not. There were a lot of people who looked much more hungry than I was, and they were kind of pushing me out of the way and said, "Don't you?"
I totally get that. I was trying to bid on some cakes, but it just didn't work out for me.
I know that carrot cake, man, at the end.
It looks so good.
It did look so good. I didn't get it though.
Yeah. I also turned 28 last week. Happy birthday to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And today is Vice Chair Kendall.
Yes.
Today is his actual birthday, I believe.
He turns 20 years old today. He's I know he's such a baby. No, he's not a baby. He's a very mature young man, but he's just incredible. I'm really, really proud of him, and I'm glad to have him on.
He is a very mature and intelligent young man, but I just got to say the boots I'm wearing right now are as old as he is. So it's pretty shocking.
No, I feel like you were 20 just yesterday, Dennis.
It feels like it sometimes. Sometimes. Another big thing that happened this past week is we all got to see Beto in Fort Worth, and that was an awesome packed house. There was thousands of people there, and he was spot on as usual, talking about what needs to be done to make Texas a place where everybody wants to live. Right, so it was a really good one. Really good one.
It really was.
And he gave a really great shout out to Tarrant County.
Yes.
Tarrant County is vital to winning Texas, and I'm glad that the Beto campaign is acknowledging that.
Oh yeah, well, I mean they recognize it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the other big thing of note at that event was Miss Opal Lee being there, who was a civil rights icon for people that don't quite think the name sounds familiar.
Know?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, but this young woman's 95 years old. A few years ago, she decided to go take a walk, a couple thousand miles up to Washington, D.C., put some emphasis on civil rights, and particularly getting Juneteenth declared a national holiday, which has recently been done and signed by the President Biden. So she's one of our stars in the party, and she introduced Beto at the event, and she was very vibrant and vivacious and looked like she was ready to go out and block walk for him and all of that stuff. So it was great to see her.
It was. And for those who don't know, I mean, Juneteenth has Texas ties just beyond, the fact that Opal Lee advocated for it, but it actually is to commemorate the Union soldiers coming to Galveston, Texas, and finally informing everybody, that the Emancipation Proclamation happened.
Over 2 years later.
Yeah.
2 years after that. Yes. That.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not great.
Known as General Order 3, for those of you that want to hit the Google machine and look that up. General.
Okay.
It was at the. I was just going to say it was announced at the Ashton. It was announced at the Ashton Villa Estate on Galveston at the time. That house still stands there. It survived the hurricane of 1900. And if you go down there and take a tour, you can see where the general was standing on the balcony when the proclamation was made. So it's kind of a cool thing.
That is cool. I'm gonna have to make a trip down there.
And they do ghost tours.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'm a scaredy cat.
Just saying, I went on vacation with the family, and my mother loves to do ghost tours. So we did a Galveston ghost tour, and it was fun. It was creepy. It was good. Yeah. You walk around, and they tell you about, I think it was like 10,000 people that died from the massive hurricane.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of like creepy stories and houses to go with it. So it's fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Random aside. I don't know. Okay, so before we get into it, we need to remind everybody, signs are available. We have 3 options. So, we like options.
We do like options.
We have our BIG Beto sign. It's a 4x6, and it is $50 to buy and pick up and take with you, or full service, $62. You can sponsor and have it put up at a public location to help promote our candidate.
And help support our 2022 coordinated campaign to get our candidates down the ballot like Dennis elected.
Yes. And then we also have our TCDP Beto Future signs that, again, helping our down ballot candidates like Dennis. And our $15, I call them our Beto bag signs. I don't know what else to call them. Essentially it's like a plastic bag.
Yeah, but it's weather resistant. So,
Yes, yes, it is.
It's a good option.
Yes. Coordinated campaign website is live. Have you checked that out at all, Dennis?
Oh yes, I've been on it many times.
Woo.
Oh, okay. Well, good deal. Good deal. Yeah. So on there, we've got, announcements for upcoming events. Are we going to see you at our next town hall, do you think?
You should. It's on my schedule, so hopefully, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, as us old people say. We'll be there.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, August 27th, for those listening, save the date. We have an upcoming candidate town hall. Should be really good. It's going to be at UAW Local 276 Union Hall from 2 to 4 p.m. We're going to get to hear from our candidates and see, what y'all's vision for Texas is for Tarrant County.
Yeah, we have some
It's
really
easy
great
to find.
candidates.
Easy to find. Yeah, easy to find. It's on Hearst Boulevard. It's got a big Dennis for Texas sign just right next to it, so you'll be able to, can't miss it.
Oh, so it's in your district.
Oh yes, yes.
Oh,
Yeah, and as a
awesome.
matter
So
of
even more
fact,
reason.
yeah, as a matter of fact, I had members of the local out helping me put up some big signs this weekend. So really, just want to thank you and acknowledge them once again. It's always a truth that if you want to get something done, get labor involved, because union people know how to get stuff done.
They do.
That they do. For sure. Yes. What else?
This is just a constant reminder. Make sure you register to vote by October 11th for the November general election.
Yes. Deadlines always seem far away, and then
They'll sneak up on you.
they really do. Especially once the holidays start coming, it's going to be like so quick, and then it's election day.
Yep.
Yeah.
Guys,
we're
I think
less
that's
than 100.
I think that's a really important point. I was just going to interject that there's been some concerns I've seen voiced from some of the other counties in Texas about some voter rolls being purged and things like that. So you want to make sure, if you're already registered or you think you are, go check that. There's you can get online at votetexas.gov, and it's got a variety of resources that will help you confirm your voter registration, make sure it matches your driver's license. If you're not registered to vote, you can use that same website to download an application, get it in the mail. As Rachel said, you need to have that in before October 11th to be able to vote in the general election. So if you're 17 right now and you're going to be 18 before the election, you can still register to vote as well. So check that site out. It's votetexas.gov, and you'll be able to get what you need to make sure you're either registered, or if you want to register, get an application, fill it out, and mail it in.
Wonderful. And for those of you wanting to get involved even more beyond just registering to vote, though that is very important, we actually have our Connect Texas app that we are now launching. in conjunction with the state party, the state Texas Democratic Party. Thank y'all, I should say. But we've got lots of things on there that you can do. You can organize from your phone, which I think is pretty cool. So, I mean, there's actions you can take on there and share with others, like signing up to attend the candidate town hall coming up on August 27th, submitting a question for the candidates through that, becoming a sustaining member of your local Tarrant County Democratic Party, you know, all sorts of activities. And we're going to be updating and changing it as we go, you know, get closer to November 8th, General Election Day. So if you haven't already, go on our Facebook, check it out. We've got a link. You can sign up and join and then share it with others.
Yeah, let's make sure everybody's connected for this November election. We got to get everybody involved.
So before we do kind of more of a formal interview with you, Dennis, would you like to join us as we discuss some news highlights, some things we're kind of keeping track of and paying attention to?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we're going to start with the sad news, unfortunately, of the shooting. Did you hear about this? The shooting that took place at Six Flags in Illinois over the weekend?
No, I didn't hear about that one. I knew about the Cincinnati shooting. So what
Oh, wow. Okay. I missed that. So there was a shooting that took place in Gurnee, Illinois over the weekend. And there's a harrowing video of just a mass of people running and trying to get like a fence open and escape. There's video of people huddled down in the waiting lines for rides. You know, it may not be Texas, but it's another shooting. And it's, you know, for me, this is the week my kids go back to school.
Yeah.
You know, Uvalde is very much top of mind because of that. And then now on top of that, a Six Flags, not in Texas, but in Illinois. You know, we're just, it's keeping pace, sadly, I think. The level of shootings we're seeing, it's not receding. It's just a steady constant now. I just don't think that's the kind of world we want to leave our children or our grandchildren.
No, definitely not. No, it's ridiculous. And I don't know, like Dennis just said, there's another one. And
evidently Cincinnati. I missed that one.
So this was the individual that walked into the FBI field office in Cincinnati.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Had it and fled and had a shootout in a cornfield outside the city. He had been radicalized by the FBI serving a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. He'd been radicalized much before that, but I guess the catalyst for his actions was the execution of the search warrant down in Mar-a-Lago. You know, just a general point, Rachel, on this comment, you know, the shootings are going to consistently go on. And the reason for it is simple. We have way too many guns in this country and way too many people that have no business having them. And so I really feel sometimes for law enforcement and everybody else that's trying to keep the community safe, because this is like, you know, trying to put sandbags up on a river that's about to flood. They're overwhelmed. And what we've really got to do is just encourage people to be more aware of the folks that they know that might have access to guns. And if they have an issue around mental health, which many of these things do, whoever is executing these shootings are unstable, go ahead and say something. Call the authorities, you know, talk to somebody that knows them, whatever you can do to walk them back from executing one of these events, because it's going to take a holistic approach. It's not just a law enforcement issue, it's a citizen issue as well. And we have, I think last count I heard something on the order of 400 million guns in the country. That's more than one per person in terms of people that live here. So it's a epidemic issue. I think we had 60,000 deaths or something along those lines over the last year or so. We're about 22,000 deaths already this year, I think. There's a lot of violence going on, and access to weapons makes these things significantly worse, right? So we've just got to be more aware and keep an eye on things. If you see something, say something.
Oh, I mean, so well said. And to your point, Cincinnati, yes, apologies. Took me a minute, but yeah, I mean, he got radicalized by a lot of the rhetoric that we're still hearing out of Republicans, even now. You know, with all this insidious implication of, you know, just implying as if there are still some issues with the 2020 election. There's not. It's been litigated. It's gone through the process that we call the rule of law. Yeah. And there's no massive fraud. There is no massive fraud. And to continue to perpetrate that is to continue to lay the groundwork for the fraud you're planning to commit.
Yeah.
You know, it's just pure projection, I think, on the Republicans' part, which actually brings me to Ted Cruz.
Yeah. Ted Cruz.
Yeah. Ted. Oh, Ted.
That
yes.
guy.
So, you know, Ted Cruz was stumping for a Republican candidate, a down ballot candidate, similar to like what Dennis is running for here, state legislature, the state house. And it was in Nevada, and he says, you know, that's why I'm here today. And of course, he's doing his best tough guy impression. I don't know what to call it.
Macho.
I don't.
Anyway,
whatever the.
He's doing his Ted Cruz impression. If he's a person, I don't know. So he says that's why he's here today. I want to ask every one of you to come out to vote for this guy 10 times. And he, you know, says, now look, we're not Democrats. Okay. Again, the election was litigated. There was no massive fraud. They just lost because more people showed up. And again,
I think, you know, Ted Cruz is one of the worst offenders of this because he is, you know, he's not a stupid man. He's smart and he knows exactly what he's doing. This is gaslighting, and he's going out to people just to continually lay the idea that there's a specter of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of undocumented people have infiltrated into the country just to go vote. You know, it's a little bit shameful and embarrassing that this guy actually is a senator from the state that I live in and love and want to represent down in Austin. He has consistently performed like this and never done anything legislatively to really help the state out. The guy is on his second term as a senator, and I can't find a piece of legislation that he has authored or co-sponsored that's actually helped Texans. So he needs to ask himself, maybe I should go do my job instead of trying to go out and being a poor stand-up comic out in Nevada. You know, it's really, really shameful. So I think the other thing we've got to continually point out, you know, the people that believe that this election was stolen, they are always going to believe this election is stolen. You could put reams of data in front of them and they would tell you it's all fake news and all that kind of stuff. The thing that concerns me more are the folks that are not paying attention, that can be swayed by all of this language, and they can also be talked into acts of violence, right? Mm-hmm. The FBI just recently put out a warning statement regarding the chatter that they're seeing across all of these kind of right-wing communications vehicles like Telegram and Truth Social and so on, and seeing the level of violence being discussed, being amped up, and they're doxing the FBI agents that serve the warrant in Mar-a-Lago. This is all very, very dangerous because it winds up motivating some people like that unfortunate soul in Cincinnati to believe that that their country is actually being stolen from them, and they've got to go commit an act of violence to stop it. So we have to make sure that, you know, we don't help inflame that stuff, but focus on the things that we know to be true. Republican after Republican after Republican, Secretary of State, judges sitting in front of cases looking at these alleged actions that were submitted. Republicans validated, Republican governors like Doug Ducey, Brian Kemp, and others validated the veracity of the election results. Donald Trump lost. He is a loser. They need to get over it and move on. But they're not going to. And so what we have to do is not buy into, you know, the nonsense about this. We just say, look, that was a couple years ago. Joe Biden is in the White House right now. Let's focus on making things better, right?
Right.
You know, if you want to believe that the election was stolen, that's fine. But you know what? People are still hungry. People are paying too much money for things because of inflation. We have a climate crisis on our hands. We've got things that we've got to do to help our kids. Let's focus on those things and stop trying to litigate something that happened 2 years ago, because it's not going to change the events of things. He's not going to be magically restored to office. He's not going to get that back. He's out of the office. He lost the election. Let's move on, right? That's the only way I know.
My concern is though. That's my concern.
Well, I think it's a valid one. You know, I think it's a valid one. When you have people allegedly in positions of authority, whether it's Ted Cruz or, oh Lord, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert or all these folks that come out and they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. Standing up there and just spouting off this nonsense, they know that they're inciting people, and then they'll throw their hands up and say, well, no, we didn't have anything to do with that. That wasn't us. It was, you know, a mental health issue or something like that, which they're helping propagate because of all of the things that they're throwing out there. Meanwhile, we have a president of the United States that, if anybody's paying attention, has done some pretty remarkable things in less than 2 years, right? So I think we also need to bring up those kinds of things. You know, for the first time, the federal government's going to be able to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies about drug prices. That's going to provide real relief for people. For the first time, we have substantive climate change legislation being passed. That's going to help.
The largest
we got health care for vets.
Yes.
You know, we got health care for vets suffering from burn pit borne diseases passed. We got the CHIP Act, which is going to boost our manufacturing process here in the country. We've got the infrastructure bill, which is already seeing benefits with projects going on in state after state after state. And the reason you know why is because Republican congressmen and women are going to those states where those monies are being allocated and say, hey, I brought this home, even though they voted against the legislation. So we have a man that's not patting himself on the back. He's got his head down. He's doing his job. I think it's a pretty remarkable, 18 to 20 months here. And, he deserves a big round of applause from everybody, as well as Congress, because they got this legislation done, So we have a lot of good stuff that we can talk about. Unlike the Republicans, which are trying to scare us, from CRT or hordes of aliens invading our country on the border, really naughty library books that need to be pulled off shelves. It's just over and over and over again. What they bring forward are things that don't do anything to improve the state of Texas. But you listen to Beto and you listen to the Democrats, and you know what? We're going to fix the public education system. We're not going to do that by taking money and throwing it into private schools or into religious schools. We're going to fix the problems that they've ignored for the last 20 years. We're going to expand Medicaid, which is going to keep people alive and is going to lower costs for everybody. We're going to do something about property taxes and get corporate commercial property owners to pay more of the share of the property tax burden so it doesn't always fall on residential property owners. These are tangible things that are going to affect people's lives in a positive manner, and they're all brought forward by the Democratic Party. So if you want to understand who's got your interest in heart, that's going to listen to you and understand what your particular concerns are and try to go do something about it, you want to talk to a Democrat, because the Republicans, they don't want to hear that. They want to scare you. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're.
But this is what we're about. We're actually trying to help.
Dennis, you made a great point.
I think that just to kind of close that loop a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You see the results of the outreach that Beto is doing. I see it on the campaign trail in my district as well. There are people that come to his meetings, and I knock on doors with people that are, initially 180 degrees opposed to what I'm standing for. If they ask me if I'm a Democrat and I say yes, they just about close the door on me. But I go, wait a minute, let's talk about what you want out of a representative in Austin, because that may or may not have anything to do with a Democrat or a Republican point of view, right? And so when you engage in a conversation and you don't just ridicule somebody because of the party that they're in, and you find out, you know what, I am concerned about the safety of my kids at school. So let's talk about how to fix that, right? And we can probably come to a conclusion, maybe not be perfect, but we can get closer to getting those kids safer at school than we would if you just slammed the door in my face. So Beto is doing that every day. I have no idea how that man has that much energy, because he does 2 or 3 of these town halls a day. And every one of those guys, sometimes there's a gun-toting evangelical pastor showing up, and he does a sidebar conversation with them. At a minimum, they leave shaking hands and respecting each other. This is the way we need to operate in campaign. And we need to remember that we're asking for a job to serve the people. It's not because we think if we're in charge, then, oh boy, man, I'm going to be able to parlay that job into something really cool for me, and I might, go get a yacht and sail around the Caribbean as a result. No, that's not the bet. We have work to do. And our supervisors, in my case, are the 190,000 people that live in my district. Those are my bosses, right? And I'm their employee, and I have to take that attitude towards this when I go to work for them. And everybody that goes into public service needs to have that point of view, because this is not about getting the next gig or getting a promotion or a book deal or a consulting gig when you leave. It's about doing the work when you get sworn in and you go on session, and then you can go do constituency services. And I think that anybody that comes at this with a different perspective is they're not thinking straight, and they should go find some other opportunity.
Yeah, it's not about a straw poll at CPAC. It's
no.
It's about meeting the needs of constituents. It's spot on. I agree.
Well, I think the other thing to add to that is that you talk to a lot of these people, and they're living their lives, right? They're doing their jobs, they're paying their bills, they're raising their kids, they're doing their lawn, they're fixing their cars, they're doing all this stuff. The last thing in the world they really want to have to worry about is whether or not the government that is providing the critical service for them to live their lives is doing a good job or not, right? And that's why it's so important that people that go in to do these jobs, particularly in the legislative branch and the executive branch, is that they've got the requisite oversight on all the things that are supposed to be done to take care of people. The grid is a prime example. For over 25 years, the Republican governance in this state is focused on economy of scale, making things cheaper, reducing cost. And what they've done as a result is they've taken their eye off the ball. And so equipment, when it's used, starts to wear out. It gets old. It needs to be replaced on occasion. It needs to be winterized, as an example. And when it doesn't, and you have a catastrophic failure that results in the lives of 700 people being lost, the first question you want to know is, who was supposed to be watching the store while that was going on? Who was supposed to be fixing that? Why didn't you fix that? Well, we didn't fix it because you told us not to. Well, that's another problem that we've got to fix. But the guy that's living in my district in Arlington, Texas, that gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning and goes to his job at the assembly line at the GM plant and gets off at 6 o'clock, and he wants to go have a beer with his buddies before he goes home and goes to his kids' softball game or baseball game, goes home to dinner, does the homework, goes to sleep, and then gets up and does it all over again, he shouldn't have to think about, well, are my lights going to come on or not? There's an implicit contract that they make with people like us to look after them, and we have not been doing that. And so we have to, because I'm not interested in getting big campaign contributions from a natural gas producer, because I didn't force them via regulations to winterize their equipment. I'm interested in that guy that's working at GM's plant having his lights come on when he turns the lights on, and he can heat his home or cool it depending upon the weather outside, right? And so this is what I think governance should be about. This is the way all of their candidates, and I believe almost to a person, every Democrat that I've talked to that's running for office has the same point of view. And if we continue to push that message out to the people that are listening to us and considering hiring us for those jobs, I think we're going to be very successful come November.
I think so. I think you make, again, really great points. It's not about what accolades you can get for yourself. It's about how you can best serve the people. I think too often, a lot of people, I know when I've talked with people at doors, there's frustration. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of frustration with, why do I get all of these extra fundraisers from my kids' school? Shouldn't we just be funding the schools? Or,
yes.
Why do I have to worry about, school shootings? Why
should be a safe place?
Don't we have a process in place for background checks? Or, why did we sell without a permit? That's crazy, right? All of these frustrations. And I think too often Republicans, especially that are in power right now, are really good at avoiding answering those questions. And they use that bureaucracy to frustrate people and say, see, your government can't work. It doesn't work for you.
Even though they are the government.
But they are the government. They are the government. And you're right. I mean, the people at the door, they're not wrong. It is frustrating. It's not working how we intend it. But guess what? We can replace those people. We can get better people like Dennis in there who want to listen, who feel our concerns and feel that sense of urgency, as parents, as just everyday people in the community. That's what you're for. That's what you're for. And I'm so excited about having, potential Representative Dennis Sherrard in Tarrant County.
Well, thanks. I think, the irony to what you just said, Rachel, is that, the Republicans have always been the guys that have decried government. They're saying, remember Ronald Reagan's famous line, the worst words in the English language, or I'm from the government and I'm here to help, right? That kind of thing. And then they go get elected, and then they prove how awful it is, and then they ask to be reelected, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's the irony, right? But if I was a conspiratorial thinking kind of person, I would think this is just a huge initiative to privatize everything so somebody can make a buck on it, right? So don't have government services anymore. You got to go sign up like you do with your cell phone to get the fire services to come to your house if it's on fire. Can you imagine how crazy something like that would be? But I think that we've got a really, really hard task in front of us to tell people, no, there are actually people like me and others that think governance can be a tool for good, and it can be done well, and people will benefit from it. Because we've got decades of lies and misdirection and misinformation shouting at the rooftops that it's exactly the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think it's that disregard me that I see on the opposite side. It's that disregard for the BS. Maybe
there's a big disconnect.
Let me keep my language clean here. But the BS that they continue to kind of push, the Ted Cruz failed comedian attempts at implying that there's a bunch of cheating going on when it comes to voting. There's not.
even though
it's elections they oversaw that they won re-election in. They're not questioning those results. But they are continuing to sow doubt among the public, sow doubt and distrust of the process. And again, it's people they have put in place. A lot of the time for these positions. We just another story that we could talk about. There have been false allegations of voter fraud in the 2020 election that are still plaguing Tarrant County and have led to threats against local Tarrant County elections administrators and workers. And that's a problem. You can't have democracy without election workers. And a lot of these people, it is paid, but it is done not because of the money. It's done because you love your community and your country, and you want to serve.
Yeah, it's public service.
But by tainting the process and sowing that distrust, sowing that doubt, again, they're trying to sabotage the very thing that got them elected.
Correct.
Make that make sense.
Well, I think it's all of a piece, right? And it goes back to the changing demographics in our state and in our country writ large, right? There's a lot of people that are terrified that people that look like me are going to be replaced by people that don't look like me, and that's kind of it's some of the core of these things being pushed out there. When you talk about the things that need to be dealt with, that a government can do to have a positive impact on. So let's take education for just as an example. So Texas has ranked in the bottom half of the nation in its education outcomes, its spending per pupil, its teacher pay for decades and decades. And we see the results of that, which are poor outcomes for a lot of our students, right? Now, the right wants to tell you right now that's because the education system has failed. And therefore, we need to look for other alternatives. So we see charter schools jump up. We see voucher ideas for helping pay tuition to private schools. That's not the problem. The problem is that for decades, the state government has strangled the public education system to death because it hasn't kept up the funding and focused on the things that are necessary to ensure that a child has a great opportunity for success during their academic career in the public schools. Now, are there problems? Of course. We have to educate everybody that comes in school. We have a large population, 6 to 7 million kids every year that are in the public school system, right? A lot of those kids are economically distressed. They come from troubled homes. So there's going to be some issues with the kids, whether they're truant or not, whether they're able to stay on point and do their studies and all those kinds of things. That's true. But you know what you do? You don't cut school funding because school performance, because they couldn't pass the STAR test, said this is a failing school. You don't close that down and then send those kids to an already overcrowded school somewhere else. You put really good teachers, really good counselors, really good people in those places, and you work with those kids until they can turn that around. So you have to spend money to repair and remediate and get those things fixed. Then, if you want to add to that by having arts magnet schools, charter schools that focus on specific engineering skills, or whatever you want to do, be my guest. And by and large, if you want to send your kid to a private school, you have that choice. That exists with you right now. You save up the money, you avoid spending it on something else, and you put it in tuition for your kids to go to school. Don't expect that the taxpayer should be providing you a coupon for something that you already want to do, which is to send your child to private school. Focus on
There's
this.
varying levels of accountability.
Exactly. And when they aren't held to the academic standards that are necessary for a kid whose parents can't afford to send him to private school or can't afford to send them across town because of their lives to the charter school, right? You're harming that child, right? Because resources are being taken away from them. They're not being given the opportunity to succeed. And they're the people that need the opportunity to succeed more than anybody else. So when the Republican idea that, well, that institution is failing, fund the child, not the system, that's code word for we want to go fund private schools. And we want to put money out of that system into the hands of people that are going to try to make a buck off of it. And so for-profit enterprises now become in charge of all of this. Education is not the premier issue. Profit is the premier issue. They're a business. I'm a businessman. You don't get into these things for altruistic reasons unless you're planning on being nonprofit. You're in it to make money, and you're going to figure out a way to do that. So that's the wrong way of thinking, but it's the way that the legislature has been doing this for so long. And how do you know that they know it's a bad idea? Because if they put it to a public referendum, it wouldn't pass. So therefore, they've got a gerrymandered district so they can retain control and they can write the legislation that they want, right? And this is what we've got to go beat back. We've got to get control of the legislature, and we have to allow for, we don't currently do that right now. We don't have public referendums like Kansas did on the issue about abortion. We need to do that in Texas. We have 30 million people here in Texas. Their voice should be heard, not a rigged, gerrymandered legislature who don't listen to them. And if the Democrats get control of the legislature, and particularly if I go to Austin, that's one of the things that I'm going to work for, is to get embedded in the Constitution the ability for the public to have a referendum on issues like that, on things like background checks, on Roe versus Wade, on public school funding, and all of those kinds of things. The legislature can work out the details, but the public needs to give us direction because they are our bosses as to where we need to take this stuff. Ran over, sorry.
No, I mean, I agree. And I was going to chime in and then you volunteered the information, but I would love to see that added as a vehicle, again, for the people, because we've seen referendums in other states pass with overwhelming majorities despite the Republican legislature. But then we've seen, I forget where it was. I want to say Ohio, but I could just be, making that one up. But there was a Republican legislature that the referendum passed, and I believe it was related to Roe, codifying Roe protections. And they were like, no, we want to just ignore that. Sure. So, I mean, I'd love to see a process in place, but also the will of the people, represented, but also not ignored.
I think it's important because what it does is it starts to get what I refer to as citizen participation in making the decisions on how laws are written in our country, right? It's not just one thing of saying, well, I'm voting for Dennis and I'm sending him to Austin because he's a good guy, got a cool hat.
Which they should.
Write some legislation. Well, notwithstanding, they should have a voice and their voice gets heard. Now, when you engage in these things, as you know, you get more informed about stuff and you start to pay attention to things about more. And that's what we want, is we want an informed electorate getting active and engaged in the process to help us figure this stuff out. Pot legalization is another one, right? That should be a statewide referendum. We see microcosms of these things all the time in cities and municipalities. The city that I live in is Bedford, Texas. There was a referendum on the ballot last year about being able to do retail sales for liquor, right? You can go to a restaurant in Bedford and get a drink if you wanted, but you couldn't go to a store in Bedford and buy a bottle of whiskey if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. You had to go to Euless or Arlington or a surrounding city. And guess what? All that sales tax revenue for that purchase went to those municipalities. It didn't go to Bedford. Well, why can you not do that? You're not stopping anybody from Bedford from driving another 2 minutes to go to Euless to buy that bottle of whiskey if you want. So let's have a referendum and let's decide if the city wants to do this or not. And guess what? The people did. And so now we have retail stores that sell liquor in Bedford. This is something that can be very effective for citizen engagement, citizens becoming more informed about what's going on in their communities. And I think we need to be doing this statewide on the real big ticket items, right? Because it's absolutely truth. The people that live in San Saba, Texas, have a different experience in life than the people that live in Dallas, Texas. But there's some fundamental things that are all the same relative to wanting their kids being taken care of and being safe, having public education work well. It should work well in San Saba just like it does in Highland Park, Texas, right? Okay. So those things should be, on my mind, not to the whim of a majority in the Texas legislature. It should be a public referendum, and then the legislature says, okay, we just decided we're going to legalize cannabis statewide through a public referendum. You guys have got to go figure out what the rules are. You got to write some laws around this stuff, right? That's your job. But we told you what we want. So go do it, come back to us and put the laws in place that regulate what we want to have done. That's the way, in my mind, that we should be making this work, because it gets both the public and their employees, being the legislature, working closer together to solve a problem, right? And I think we could make a lot of really great improvements across the state if we started looking at things like that. But we don't even have the opportunity of doing it because the Republicans are scared of it. They don't want the voice of the people making these decisions. I mean, in their platform right now, they've told you they do not want to allow public referendums to make decisions at the statewide level. So they understand that because their ideas aren't great, they probably get voted down. Therefore, they're against that kind of thing. So I think it's something we really should promote. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican that would like to have more of a voice in this, or an independent, a libertarian, a green, whatever floats your boat, you ought to have more of a voice and say in determining the rules that we live in our state. It's simple, right?
It seems like a no-brainer, honestly. And I think that would also improve turnout if people weren't just voting on candidates, but on certain issues. Man, our turnout would be incredible.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's like 70% of Texans did not want Roe to be overturned, did not want the laws put in place. I mean, just to warn our audience, August 25th, Texas trigger law goes into effect. There are no exceptions for rape or incest. That's not supported, again, by 70% of Texans did not want that, do not want that. And it's not for, the lack of people. We are the majority. It's just successful voter suppression, voter apathy, unfortunately, because of the massive voter suppression efforts and the propaganda around that, and acting as if, the government they are breaking is not worth trying to, invest your time and effort in. It is. With candidates like Dennis and with Shannon Elkins, Gwen Baroud, we have so many wonderful candidates that are ready to really bring that government back down to the roots level. And I'm so excited.
And I to interject something there, I think the other player, the other actor in that play, which is the voter, I'm getting much more optimistic, because as I go out and I talk to people, I'm seeing a higher degree of enthusiasm and determination to go, make some changes occur, right? In the last two cycles, we've seen an uptick in voter turnout, which has been wonderful. I think we're going to see a massive wave of voter turnout, and part of it's the Roe decision, of course, or the Dobbs decision, excuse me, but other things as well, right? Which is, look, we're particularly folks that are much younger than I am, they're still wrestling with student loan debt, they're wrestling with the inability to buy a house, they're wrestling with climate change and all those kinds of things. And they're saying this has not been working, right? So we're going to go make some changes on this, and we want people that are willing to listen to us to go do what we want and make sure that those things occur. So I'm seeing a bow wave of enthusiasm, and I'm very optimistic that come November, we'll see Beto work win the governorship. We have a good chance we have to flip 9 seats in the House, 4 in the Senate to gain control of the legislature. We need to get Dan Patrick out of there and get Mike Collier elected, right? We need to get Janet Dudding elected as controller. We need to get Rochelle Garza elected as AG, Jay Kleberg elected as land commissioner, right? Over and over and again, the statewide candidates have brought forth a vision and a message of competence, of commitment to doing right by the people of Texas. And every legislative candidate that I've worked with and talked to on the campaign to date has said the same thing. We're there to do a job. We're there to do a job, and to do that job almost to a person. Their objective is, I want to leave the place better than I found it, right? And we should all think that way when we go into a public service kind of a role. So I'm pretty optimistic that November is going to shed some good news for us.
Oh, I think so. I think Texas is the sleeping giant that nobody is ready for.
Mhm.
I really do. And I think honestly though, the reason for that is going to be largely education and our energy grid and climate change, because they're all of a piece together.
Yes.
Just to bring it back to education for a second. We are dealing with, and again, this is part of our headline highlights, which will be on our bulletin brief. If you're not already subscribe to our emails. TarrantDemocrats.org/subscribe. Anyway, we're having a massive teacher shortage.
Yes.
A massive one, and this is again should not be a surprise. The very people in charge of government are the ones breaking these services, breaking and disrupting and causing the angst and turmoil we're all experiencing around this. But several schools, I think this is actually possibly an interesting development, because I joke about this at work all the time. But there are some school districts that are looking to switch to a 4-day school week, especially like in rural Texas. Because of this massive teacher shortage we're experiencing. Nearly 43,000 Texas teachers have left their job in the last school year, according to a Texas American Federation of Teachers report in July. That's 66% of educators in Texas have said they're considering leaving. That's
a lot.
That's not a tiny percentage. That is well more than half. I left the profession because of lack of support, lack of pay. I think that's the sleeping giant Republicans have maybe inadvertently awakened. It really touches on so many areas, and your local schools, they play such a role in the community.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a teacher in Carroll ISD, and she was telling me that they are pulling books off the shelves. And I don't know, she was completely devastated because obviously this is taking away a world from these kids.
Well, sure it is. And we have practical, real-time, recent experience that when kids can't socially interact with each other, when they can't learn together, when they can't be with each other for a significant period of their day, they have a lot of issues. They have a lot of anxiety issues. They have performance issues. They have a whole bunch of stuff, right? The forced experiment on remote learning and things like that COVID brought to us shows that some kids are really good for that. It works really well with them. Others, not so much, and it causes a lot of problems. Now, when you have 43,000 teachers out of the population suddenly disappearing, that means there's less time student to teacher relationship. There's less time for them to see an issue that may need to be resolved, less time for them to encourage that kid to go off and do something he may be reticent of trying to do because doesn't have enough confidence, but everything being equal, that teacher encourages them, inspires them, right? It makes it more burdensome on them. And the fix is easy. The fix on this is easy. And this is why it's such a shameful thing that we have been doing to these teachers for the last 10, 15, 20 years. The legislature can go immediately raise all their pay. They can add more money to every independent school district to hire more teachers in this community. They can make sure that these teachers have the resources that they need. It is a matter of choice. The money's in the budget. If you don't like where that's going, if you don't like that, then you're not interested in solving the problem, because that is what you have to do to solve the problem. The climate side of this is true as well. Now think about Texas, the largest energy producer in the nation. We already are right now. We could be doing so much better, particularly with renewables.
Yes.
Particularly with renewables. With solar, with wind, with nuclear, all of these things could be increasing our capability and output. Actually, we're already overproducing wind energy, because I read an article the other day that we don't have enough transmission lines from the source of generation to the power distribution systems. So therefore, they have to shut wind turbines down. So we're giving up electricity, right? And we have this giant fusion generator in the sky called the sun that we could be putting more solar panels on. Somebody answer me this question. We have thousands of state buildings across the state of Texas. Why don't we have solar arrays on the roofs of all of these things?
That's a great question.
Generating so we have the chance. We have the chance of going in and really making some substantive, positive change for the people in Texas. And I think these messages are beginning to start to get out there, coupled with the frustration of not seeing anything positive being done for the last 20, 25 years from the Republicans. So once again, I'm pretty optimistic about this, right? But the core thing for us, though, I'm going to focus on the teacher issue for a moment, Rachel, because if you don't have enough people to manufacture a car doesn't get made, right? But if you don't have enough teachers to instruct a child, that child has lost that period of time that they will never get back, ever, in terms of their enrichment, their inspiration, their encouragement, their learning, or whatever, right? It's gone. And we can't allow that to happen simply because we're making bad choices at the legislative and executive branch of Texas.
I mean, agree. And it's not even just at that level, though. I mean, it's all the way down to school board. Like,
Sure.
Again, elections, they all matter. Like, there is no off-year elections. I know the midterms often get referred to that as such.
But they're so important.
There are no off-year elections. There's just
Sure.
every year is an election year, and who is on the top of the ticket fluctuates. But every year is an election year. So we're going to throw that out of the vocabulary, off-year elections. It's not a thing. Because we're seeing a hat tip to our communications chair, Maricela. Thank you for this tip. And South Lake Anti-Racism Coalition PAC as well.
Right.
They both brought attention to this. But Carroll ISD School Board has just announced, and I mean just announced within the last 24 hours, that they are going to have their next school board meeting on the first day of school. Now, I don't know about y'all, but
seems like a bad idea.
I'm going to be taking my kids to school the first day. They don't go to Carroll, thank God. But I'm going to take them to school, and then I'm going to come to work. I still have to work. I still have to do all the normal, things as expected of an adult. So most parents are probably not going to be able to attend this. And the agenda, hang on. I'm going to pull this up real quick because this agenda just it's terrible. So they're going to get a presentation by the organization Patriot Mobile. Patriot Mobile is one of the private companies that they forked over hundreds of thousands of dollars for these school board candidates in these nonpartisan races, and they made it a very partisan fight. They want to give a presentation to require all the schools to hang In God We Trust signs. Now, I personally am a non-religious person, and there's no problem. You practice your faith. I'll not or will practice mine, whatever it may be. But I just don't see that as a smart use of the school board members' time. It's not even a religious thing. It's just
or tax dollars.
There's a massive teacher shortage, and you're going to spend your tax dollars and time on this pet project from your donors that helped you get elected, as opposed to addressing the teacher crisis. Like that, again, it's a perfect encapsulation of the problem we're seeing from conservatives and Republicans running in these races who want to decry government as the problem. Then they get elected and they're doing all these little pet things for their donors instead of government for the people.
Right.
Yeah,
again, it's a matter of priority and it's a matter of choice. And this is the crux of the issue, which is when you go into the voting booth, think about your kids, think about your sisters, your brothers, your mothers, your fathers, your wives, husbands, uncles, whatever. You think about the vote that you're casting is going to have a positive impact on you and is going to have a positive impact on them. Because if it does, that means it's going to have a positive impact on everybody else as well, right? And if you go and support something like this initiative of this group to put theological statements in every school, right? Then you knowingly are going in and you're proselytizing a specific point of view. And that's a violation of our First Amendment, right? Because there's going to be in that school somewhere, there's going to be a non-believing child, there's going to be a Jewish child, there may be a Hindu child, there may be a Buddhist child, there may be a Muslim child, there may be a Native American child that doesn't believe in any European or Middle Eastern religions, but one of their own faith. And they're going to feel diminished somewhat because their representative faith is not there. So you are purposely going in and dividing up the community inside the school. And you're making it much more difficult for teachers to have to navigate those shoals because some young Muslim kid who's inquisitive might say, why does it not say, in Allah we trust? A teacher shouldn't have to answer that question, right? So you're putting them into a difficult situation as well. And so we just need to stop this kind of nonsense because it doesn't make that child any better educated.
No, not at all.
Right?
Nothing to do with
it doesn't make the job of the teacher any easier. Okay, those are the two factors that we should spend most of our time thinking about when we think about public education that we should do. The students and the teachers, they're the actors in the play. They're the ones that matter. So we need to worry about that and not putting things in there that are going to inhibit the teachers from doing their job or making things more difficult for students. So, it's a sad situation, but these people have a lot of money and they have a loud voice and they're going to go in and they'll probably be able to do this. The majority of the kids are going to go walk by it and never pay any attention to it. But somebody's going to be upset about this, and that's sad. That's sad that they're going to inflict that on a kid.
It's unnecessary. But not only that, it draws attention away. Again, another thing on their agenda for this meeting is a consideration to raise custodial salaries, which we all, I'm sure, agree with raising that. But again, these are all smoke screens because it's not focusing on, the superintendent, they get a pay raise too, and they're already earning a $600,000 salary.
Yeah.
Again, with struggling budgets for schools across the state, not just Carroll ISD, not just Tarrant County, across the state, massive teacher shortages. I don't think most voters, most everyday people feel like that's a good use of their elected officials' time.
I don't either. And the only way you can combat it is doing what you're doing on this podcast and having people that are engaged. You've got folks that are activists that are really working at the school board level to kind of bring this information out and let people know about it. So we've got to get citizen engagement, like we talked about before, and making certain that they don't pay attention to school board just when the elections come around, that they go hit a few meetings, that they use the public comment time effectively to talk about whether or not this is a good idea or a bad idea. Public pressure works with elected officials, and we need to amp that up to make sure that they see it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Going back though to climate change and Governor Abbott, this other story caught my eye about him having total veto power. He has basically tried to kind of take over the process of looking for somebody to bring in a CEO for ERCOT. Mm-hmm. And I wonder why he would want to have his hands all over that process and so tightly and quietly do this whole process. It's weird. It's
a good point. And I would say, a good clue for all of us amateur detectives out there is to follow the money, right? And so when you see the largest donors of his campaign re-election efforts being folks from the fossil fuel industry, you can imagine, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but you can imagine that there's a high degree of influence. Those phones get answered a lot faster than the guys from, the startup company that's working on biofuels, or it's working on some kind of renewable energy, right? That says, hey, this is where this stuff is going. Everybody knows it. You should have us come in and start working on these things because we need to transition away from a dependence too much on fossil fuels. We're always going to have fossil fuels around. Why? We need plastics. We need fertilizers. We need things like that, right? We don't necessarily need them powering every vehicle in the world. We don't need them running power plants. We've got other methods for doing that are going to help us breathe more, right? They'll help us reduce healthcare expenses because rates of asthma will go down, all that good stuff. So it is a situation where I think, once again, I may have mentioned this before, but I look at this stuff from, don't really, if you want to focus on a problem, try to understand the nature of that problem. Don't focus on the people that are being hurt by it. Focus on the people that are profiting from it. And so if those people that are profiting from it aren't doing anything to rectify the problem, I think you have a really good clue right there as to why somebody like Greg Abbott would be paying more attention to them than somebody else, right? Yeah. And this is another reason why Beto O'Rourke needs to replace Greg Abbott, because he's not serving the people. He's serving the corporations.
Well, Abbott needs to face some accountability. I mean, I do think, though, I think there's an appetite for it, even amongst his own people, because in this article, it was not one or two, it was 8.
Wow.
Eight. There's the camera. 8 sources of across the power industry that spoke to the reporters about this. And technically speaking, he's not supposed to have a formal role in the process, Governor Abbott. However, he has basically put a stranglehold on this search and is very much putting his thumb on the scale. Again, Abbott appointed the 3 people to the Public Utility Council, PUC. They are the ones who then are supposed to help with the search. So he already had some input in the process by the people he appointed. Now he's getting more in the process. So that, I mean, again, it's not right. I don't love that, obviously, but I do like that it's very obvious they're worried. Republicans are very worried. Again, the sleeping giant of Texas is awakening. The electorate is awakening. We've seen so many Beto rallies and videos where he's talking to Republican voters that have come to show up, and they're saying, the same stuff we're all saying of, not that we voted Republican, but that they're fed up. They're fed up with the lack of accountability. They're fed up with the lack of forward movement for our state, for our county, for the opportunities for our children and their safety. Like, people are really, they've had enough. Yeah.
What's really funny to me is that, the same people that will go in to a Burger King or a Starbucks and call for the manager and scream at them because they didn't get enough sugar in their coffee, or they didn't get the right slice of cheese on their hamburger, they're just fine putting these people back in charge of government that have been giving them the wrong slice of cheese and not enough sugar in their coffee for 25 years. Right? They're just fine with that. And so there's a little bit of disconnect when you think of these things. I suppose there's some core issues that are driving it, but in my mind, I think that as you said, Shannon, Rachel, people are beginning to wake up more and more of the cause of the lack of progress. What is causing the lack of progress in us fixing things? Okay, it's not socialism. It's not at all. It's not all of those people at the southern border that want to come to a country where they might have a safer and better life. They're not causing this stuff, right? It's not the heavy hand of the federal government that's causing it. It's the guys in Austin. And I think that they're like a laser beam. People are beginning to focus some of their ire and anger on this. And I really hope it culminates in November in a big sweep. We have a gigantic victory party, and then come January, we get to work on the behalf of everybody here in Texas. That's what I'm really hoping for.
Well, and to bring it back to the very beginning of the conversation when we mentioned Ted Cruz, Cancun Cruz, our favorite vacationer. But he talked about in his speech where he's pretending, the Democrats cheat, we don't. But he talks about, activating he basically is talking about relational organizing. He's basically talking about reaching out to people you already know, friends, family, coworkers, PTA moms, things like that, talking to the people and really engaging them. And he's not wrong on that.
Right.
Which brings me back to another point. Our Connect Texas app. Go on our Facebook, sign up, because it is relational organizing from your phone. And that is going to be what makes, I think, a huge difference for candidates like Dennis, as well as the rest of our down ballot slate. We really want to try to get as many people to show up as we can. That's how we win. We are the majority. We've got to show up. In spite of the voter suppression, we have to show up in huge numbers. So I'll move on from my soapbox. I do want to end, though, our last little bit, because we've only got a few more minutes, with a little bit of good news. So I don't know if y'all know this, but my daughter's middle name is Bee, like a bumblebee.
That's
B-E-E.
cute.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yes. It's kind of an homage to my husband. We met in high school, and his name is Brian, but I've always called him Bee. It's like been a thing, and we have like little bee things in our home. And so that was our compromise, if you will, because I got to pick the name Lily. It's a family name. Anyway, so this has to relate to bees. That's my long-winded way of saying this has to relate to bees. So I really thought this was cool because it was under my radar, but evidently out in Tanger Outlets. Have you been to Tanger?
Yeah, it's like 10 minutes from my house. Actually.
Okay, yeah. It's down by. Have you been, Dennis, to Tanger Outlets? Done a little shopping day with the missus?
Heading up to Denton County.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so evidently, and I didn't know this till I read the article, but they're celebrating the 1-year anniversary of having a rooftop bee colony.
Oh, that's neat.
And the whole purpose of it, the whole reason that they did this, was to help the local flora and fauna flourish. I know.
Cool.
That's a great little. Let's get more like that. Let's get more businesses, doing little things like that seem, quaint or cute, but actually can have quite a big impact on our local environment.
Yeah. I mean, you have that free space up there, so might as well use it. Like Dennis was saying, solar panels, gardens.
Well, there's some really good work that's being done in various places. There's been a few things here locally along these lines, but Detroit has done some marvelous work about taking some areas that have suffered due to blight, due to people leaving and the housing crisis in 2008, and turning these things into urban farms. And whether they're doing hydroponics or whether they're doing little lot-based allocations for communities to do group farming and things like that, you've got a lot of instances where things that used to be food deserts, right, where they couldn't get fresh groceries, now have a vibrant and thriving economic cycle there, where the stuff is grown locally, goes to the restaurants locally, goes to the market locally, so it's farm to table, and people are getting jobs where there weren't jobs before. They're learning a trade and a craft that they didn't know before. There's an opportunity for revitalizing neighborhoods that weren't revitalized before. So we can replicate models like that, and see a real strong resurgence of neighborhood revitalization and urban life coming back, right? I mean, it's the old timey kind of thing about going to the green grocer to get your vegetables and going to the butcher to get your meat and all of those kinds of things. The big box stores all have their place, right? But this also provides a vehicle for people to come in and learn new things and all that kind of stuff. And it's really encouraging to begin to see some of this. Now, when you bring energy into that equation, right? If I'm generating enough electricity, I can start processing some of that stuff and sell it externally. So I become now a mini exporter of some of those things that I'm producing that were usually consumed locally, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity for us to really make some substantive changes and improvement in our communities this way.
Sounds like you're a free market kind of guy.
A little bit.
Who knew? Who knew an actual free market would make some cool results?
Heck yeah.
It'd be nice if Republicans would like get out of the way and stop helping their big donors, have their thumb on the scale of how things will go. That'd be great.
Yeah, monopolies don't serve the free market very well.
That's so great. No.
You know, I've been a capitalist a long time, and I much prefer having you know, a large number of competitors vying for my business, because I know I'm going to be able to have a variety of options, but also make choices that are going to help me more than they help the big monopoly, right? So anyway.
All right. Well, I think we've got to wrap it there. Thank you, Dennis, for being a wonderful guest, and
Always a pleasure.
Into it a little bit with the headlines and stuff, but you did great.
Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. Folks, if you want to read up more about me, go to Dennis, FORTX94.com. Got all my stuff out there. It'll tell you who I am, what I'm about. It's got the links to all my socials. It's got a big donate button up there. If you want to throw me $1 or $2, that would be welcome. So I really enjoyed the conversation. Always a pleasure to talk to you too. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Well, thank you so much. And we will see you, the audience, next time.
Yep. See y'all next Thursday. Thanks, Dennis.